The Tutu scenarios. What will Africa look like in the year 2040? The current state.
Though Africa's youth education penetration has more than doubled over the last half century, Africa continues to suffer low and inequitable educational access, tending generally to a disconnect with the transiently developing work landscape. The Ubuntu-based value systems prevalent in folklore tales of the days of our ancestors have transitioned to more individualistic personal values. Consequently, the populace's societal orientation has been morphed into one that, though hopeful, is bereft of right attributes required to drive meaningful and sustainable transformation. On the governance front, across the continent, politics trumps technocracy. Metrocracy is replaced by nepotism, and policy pragmatism is suppressed by expediency. Ethical leaders are increasingly a rare and endangered breed. Corruption exists at every level. There is a lack of faith in the legal system and the finality of due process. Industrialization and technology brings a light in an otherwise dire assessment evident in the recent by the penetration of mobile financial systems. However, though progressive, it is still at the bottom rung of adoption and utilization of available technology in solving basic O-level needs. Internet penetration is abysmal. The economies are largely raw material export based, with high dependence on foreign aid, loans, trade, and investments with the European or Asian markets. The net effect is a high trade deficit and exposure to the grave impact of geopolitics, conflict, and unfair trade. Amidst the current uncertainty, Africa is presented with an undeniable urgency to uplift the continent up to its full potential, with the opportunity to capitalize on its vibrant and youthful population, vast renewable energy, natural resource potential, and boundless growing markets to improve its fortunes.
Following are two scenarios visualizing possible outcomes for Africa: feeble strides or giant leaps. We will start with the first. Scenario 1. Feeble strides. Global context.
The global landscape is the tug of war between the Western and Eastern axis. Climate change accelerates, and there is a concerted drive for environmentally sustainable and smart cities. Africa, as always, continues to play catch-up as it grapples with the weightier burdens of food insecurity and conflict. The vast stock of natural reserves is fast dwindling from over-exploitation, and the political and influential elite capture the profitable sectors of the economy. Most nations remain inseparably bonded to the umbilical cord of the East and West. There is a new scramble for Africa, for her natural resources and human capital.
Technology and industrialization.
There is an emphasis on extractive industries and labor-intensive industrialization. There is the tactical adoption and implementation of technology in places. However, protectionism and poor infrastructure development slow down the rate of progress. Financial inclusion expands as the mobile electric money market blossoms, allowing for cross-boundary trade facilitation. An energy crisis looms across the continent due to carbon-light global measures, threatening to cripple the manufacturing sector as production expenditure skyrockets. Yet, there are a few outliers. In East Africa, Rwanda has invested heavily in educating its young people, who are now leading the drive towards new energy sources, allowing the continent to leapfrog on that front.
Good governance.
The continent experiences an incremental progression in the good governance indicators, owing to the relentless work of anti-corruption crusaders across the landscape. The judiciary system remains corrupt, making the delivery of justice of any kind a tall order in most sub-Saharan African countries. Citizens' demand for accountability is at its highest, and demonstrations with riots are popular. Unfortunately, this further isolates the continent from FDIs and undermines many of the country's places in the League of Well-Governed Nations.
Education.
90% of African countries' education systems are obsolete. Nigeria, for instance, remains at the bottom globally, with the number of out-of-school children moving from 13 million in 2022 to 30 million in 2040. While some countries like Botswana, Kenya, and Egypt have invested heavily in tech education, they lose the direct positive impact of this to the West through mass talent immigration. The cost of good education remains extremely high. Only the haves acquire the best of education, while the have-nots endure what is left.
Scenario 2. Giant leaps. Global context.
Globalization accelerates with limited geopolitical conflict. The global collective views the climate change challenge as one that needs to be addressed. Between 2022 and 2040, Africa has developed self-reliance and is leading the global credit carbons market. Led by the Democratic Republic of Congo, the umbilical cord was cut, putting an end to Françafrique. The continent secures a global supply of necessary stable food, mostly to Europe, which is rebuilding after a decade of economic chaos and energy crisis. Nigeria and South Africa, the two largest economies on the continent, are now permanent members of the United Nations Security Council to veto any substantive resolution.
Technology and industrialization.
Across the continent, technology is seen as a critical enabler for growth. Due to the faster adoption of new or radical technologies, Africa became the epicenter of the global payment system, with the solutions that advanced its cross-border payment systems to the rest of the world. There is successful operationalization of the AfCFTA agreement, and many industries have taken unprecedented advantage of this, leaving the rest of the world out of what would have been exploitative engagements. Although some of the leapfrogging were not as successful, critical successes in major sectors such as energy and agriculture, bolstered by global funding, can be implemented at a scale to materially lift the quality of life for sectors of the population. The Congo's stable governance led to the development of major green technologies, powering most of the world's electrical vehicles. EVA, Electric Vehicles Africa, rivals of Tesla and NIO, built its first gigafactory in Nigeria and produced most of its parts in Kenya and Uganda. The New York Times piece of November 12, 2039, the editor asserted, "The world is now witnessing the real-life Wakanda on the continent."
Good governance.
African youth claim and exercise their agency in the political and economic sphere. The formation of the Pan-African Youth Political Ideology Group produced a large number of young leaders across the continent, whose minds have been shaped by organizations like the Tutu Fellowship, the Mandela Fellowship, amongst others, demonstrating sterling ethics and sheer competence. They negotiate better trade deals, and loans are zero-rated and wholly invested into productive sectors of the economy. The impact of foreign currency volatilities on the African economies is marginal to negligible. The confidence in the legal system paves way for increased foreign direct investment in the continent. Social safety nets are introduced to protect, provide, and promote the interest of weak and marginalized groups, ensuring a more uniform societal progress.
Education.
The rich get taxed to facilitate the education of the less fortunate. The practical nature of Africa's educational system progresses in a manner that leapfrogs our academia, entrepreneurship, and governance to match the best around the world. African youth is trained to be at the forefront of the global market and an attractive source of labor for the new modern world, for they are highly skilled with a culture of excellence. We leverage strongly on our population size to push indigenous innovators and creative artists to the global stage. The economy of most countries is now formalized and trends are more predictable. African citizens now assume the commanding heights of their own economies and sit at the table on global matters as contributors and not as spectators. There was an attempt to scramble for Africa's talent, but many young people chose to remain to build their respective countries, and it is paying off. This unprecedented change of attitude reflects Ubuntu virtues, creating a working population that is able to think critically and problem solve within the African context and create innovative African solutions by Africans for Africans.
Strategic agenda. Ignite Africa. Fired from within.
Strategic vision. A prosperous and progressive community of enlightened, empowered, and engaged citizens. Strategic options. Pillar 1. Shift from subsistence to sustainability. Adopt and adapt successful measures. Through mentoring, develop a community of leaders across all spheres with a future-first, long-term focus. Engage, partner, and support technology deployment. Young influencers promoting local content and products on their platform. Pillar 2. Deepen cross-border trade. Create and nourish networks between people in different countries to enable better access to information on opportunities and solution providers across the continent, and to foster trust in the delivery and quality of African products. Pillar 3. Take charge. Driving discourse to change culture and mindset by creating physical and digital spaces and platforms, using influencers and leveraging networks to implement projects. Identifying problems, gaps, and leverage local and global networks to fix issues. Stepping up to provide leadership, offering alternative policy options. Pillar 4. Nurture trust in the system and our governments. Actively participating in the political process, expanding the frontiers of accountability by creating or contributing to civil society organizations and think tanks that drive transparency and governance through data collection, analysis, and publishing platforms. Pillar 5. Create dynamic and progressive education system. Volunteering teaching times in schools, providing virtual training via blogs, YouTube, offering mentorship programs to younger leaders.